Hi, I'm Samantha Bayani.
Hi, I'm Andrea De Rama.
Hi, I'm Chloe Meneses.
Hi, I'm Chloe Fabregas.
Hi, I'm Keisha Lustre.
Hi, I'm Yuna Montenegro.
And welcome to Chicas with Muñecas.
So there's this question about whether dynasties are a symptom of weak institutions or a reason for the system that still works today. When we look at systematic corruption, elite influence, and the constant bypassing of rules in the Philippines, it is easy to assume that the state is on the verge of collapsing. We often label our formal institutions as weak. But when we ask political scientist Sir Justin Manalo why the state continues to function despite these significant vulnerabilities, he challenged that exact premise.
Hindi naman kasi hindi dahil kumbaga yung institutions natin na yan, no? I would say it's quite stable. Kasi ang bawat institutions, no, or establishments natin, excuse me, or even offices are created by law, no? So, hindi siya meron niyang sariling mandate kung paano siya pinapatakbo.
The structural blueprint of the Philippine state is not the problem. Our government offices, departments, and local units do not exist in a vacuum. They are explicitly built by law, armed with independent legal mandates designed to keep the machinery of society running. The framework itself is durable. The real vulnerability isn't the institution's design. It is the human element within it.
The problem or the concern is how the involved individuals that certain institution would run the office.
An institution is only as strong as the person sitting in the driver's seat. The state survives because its legal structures are resilient enough to withstand mismanagement, but its actual performance entirely depends on how a leader chooses to navigate that space. When formal rules bend to personal favors or elite pressure, it isn't a failure of the system itself. It is a failure of execution by the individuals running it.
So, today, we're about to tackle a massive paradox that defines modern Philippine politics. If you look at the formal government on paper, the bureaucracy, the legal system, it often looks fragile, no? It struggles to enforce laws evenly. It's constantly plagued by corruption and it seems to lack control over fearful regions.
Indeed, Kian. And if you look at it through a traditional lens, you'd have in mind that this system is on verge of total collapse. But here's the thing: it never actually collapses. Instead, it keeps it going.
Exactly, Yuna. And that is the exact reason for what we are about to unpack today. Our central thesis, which states that the Philippine state survives through local networks that simultaneously weaken formal institutions and provide political order.
But before we go further, discuss its scope. Let's break that down because it may sound like a little massive contradiction. Since you're saying that the very networks that make the government weak are also the same reason the government stays alive.
Yes, exactly. Kasi nga, it is a beautifully messy symbiosis. So, to really grasp this further, no, we have to take a look at a classic framework introduced by a certain political scientist, which is Joel S. McDowell, way back 1988, which is he called na weak state, wrong society framework.
Okay, but first, we should define or rather clarify the certain terms here, okay? Because when people hear strong society, they usually think of it as highly united public, active citizens, maybe lots of community organizing, no? But that's different from what Migdal meant, isn't it? Diba, Kian?
Actually, not at all. Kasi ano eh, in this political theory, a strong society actually means a highly fragmented society. It's dominated by powerful non-state social organizations and strongmen. We're talking about local warlords, yung mga business oligarchies natin, religious institutions, and massive landed of family clans. These groups that I've mentioned are incredibly adept at mobilizing resources and frankly skirting government regulations.
So, based on what you've said, ang society is strong because these decentralized pockets of power can, successfully push back against the capital, which this leaves us with a weak state, a central government that simply, you know, lacks the teeth to enforce law of the rule of law rather across its whole territory, especially those who are far away from Manila, no?
Tama. Definitely because Migdal saw this as a persistent, ika nila, exhausting struggle for mobilization, where the state and these local strong men are constantly fighting over kung sino dapat yung in control in terms of the population and the resources. And historically speaking, in a strong society, these non-state groups wins that struggle, effectively holding state institutions captive to protect their own private interests.
So we've been talking about Migdal's broad theory for developing nations. But paano siya ma-play out specifically dito sa Pilipinas? Since ang ating politics have a very unique taste or flavor, di ba? Parang medyo ganon.
Oo nga. Pero ito yung pinaka-interesting sa kanya since yung scholar na pinabasa sa atin na sinulat ni Patricio Abenales and Donna Amoroso, para siyang tawag nito, revision kumbaga ng work ni Migdal. And it offered a crucial modification specifically for the Philippine in context pa. They argued naman here na the state doesn't survive by defeating or dominating these local elites. Instead, it survives through mutual accommodation.
So, ang mutual accommodation is a political ideal. Like, the scratch my back, I'll scratch yours na situation thing. Ganon.
Tama. It is a complete blur of boundaries between state and society, where national politicians here sa Manila don't actually even try to crush local warlord clans. They deliberately cultivate and protect them. Bakit? Simply because the national leaders needed those local bosses to deliver millions of votes during election season and keep a lid on local unrest. In exchange naman with that, the local bosses get a free pass, access to state funds, nakakatakbo sila sa gobyerno, and a massive culture of impunity. Isipin na lang natin na it's a historical rise of clans. Kagaya nung Ampatuans in Maguindanao, it's the ultimate symbiotic way of partnership.
So, the lines between the public duty and private interest just completely evaporate, no? Tama ba?
Uh,
So, which brings us to a heavy hitter concepts that, scholars often throw around when discussing the Philippines. The patrimonialism and bossism. So, ano ba talaga yun? So, explain ko isa-isa, okay? Unang-una muna yung patrimonialism. Ito yung system wherein yung political relationships and public offices are treated as, personal or, family-run connections. The state apparatus isn't kind of neutral, let's say in that way. Professional, uh, bureaucracy. Tama, bureaucracy.
yeah.
So parang it's a family business nga used for private gain and handing out favors to their loyalists. Then yung boss system naman is the raw execution of that power. So parang it's where the local strongmen use their coercion tama yung pronunciation, coercion,
Ah.
na parang, you know, in economic monopoly and sometimes outright violence to entrench themselves in their bailiwicks, you know? So, if we tie this all back, parang to our thesis, parang ang mangyayari is the central government might be siguro, let's say na it's incredibly weak in a sense when it comes to developing the country. Since in terms na in building infrastructures or professionalizing the civil service, but it comes terrifyingly strong as a predatory state. Tama ba? Or
Tama.
parang ganun yung explanation, ba?
It is a somewhat a runaway success, kumbaga, for interlocking networks of bosses who use the machinery of the state as a tool for private wealth accumulation. Sila lang din ang nakikinabang, di ba? So, the formal institutions stay weak because the elites want them to be weak. But the political order remains stable because everyone is getting a piece of the pie. Sabi ko nga, lahat nakikinabang. Ganun.
Alam mo, Kian, na-amaze ako and it's really fascinating the fact that may parang entrenched cycle sila.
Oo nga.
And parang it leaves us with the ultimate question of how do you break the cycle? Or where the weakness of the state is actually the secret to its survival ba? Or secret to its downfall? So, dito
Oo.
natin malalaman, no?
Na you have a point there, Yuna. Kaya nga, that is exactly what we are going to unpack across the rest of this podcast. With the help of an expert, of course. More specifically, a political scientist himself, which is Sir Justin Manalo. So, guys, please stick around because we are diving deep into the history, the scandals, the controversies, and the mechanics of how those networks rule the ground. So, our favors political loyalty and personal connections replaces formal institutional procedures.
At times, siguro, no, may mga ganun talaga kapag ka mayroong mga connections, okay? Or kapag ka may mga kakilala, ganyan, no, nababypass. Mas nabibigyan ng priority. It's the thing that we do and I personally experienced no, yung ganyan. Naging part na siya ng ano natin, na Filipino. No? Pero hindi dapat, no? Kasi may sinusunod ka na proseso. And no one should be exempted no, sa proseso na yun. Kahit anak ka pa nung sino politika.
So, based sa interview natin with Sir Justin, I love that he himself admitted na naka-experience din siya nung tawag itong, sabihin natin, kumpadre system na tinatawag. Because, let's be honest guys, come on, anyone who has ever tried to get a document stamped or permit being approved in a local office knows the power of the backdoor or having a backer, kumbaga. Ano masasabi mo dun, Keisha?
Oo, I totally agree with you. The palakasan system is so normal to us that we almost forget it's a violation of formal rules. Like what he said, nobody should be exempt, not even the children of top politicians. But instead of relying on the standard checklist, people rely on who they know.
And Sir Justin points out that it isn't just a political flaw. It's deeply tied to our actual culture. Actual culture here sa Pilipinas, not just in terms of politics. Well, lahat naman is umiikot sa politika. Ika nga nila. It is somehow more related to a distortion of Filipino values.
Parang na-impluwensyahan dyan yung yung kultura natin ng mga Pilipino na yung utang na loob, gano'n, no? So, or yung pagbibigay ng pabor. Ganyan. Gagawin ko to sa'yo, and I'm expecting that in the long run, merong mababalik yan sa akin in whatever form it may be. Okay? Napapasok din yung ganong Filipino values natin. Gamit siya in a negative aspect.
That is a huge distinction. Utang na loob, a debt of gratitude, is meant to be a beautiful cultural trait about community and helping each other. But when it enters local governance, it becomes transactional.
Oo. It becomes, ano pa, para masabihin to, I'll skip the line for you today, but you owe me later. Alam niyo yan, yung may balik talaga na kailangan mong, hindi na siya, genuine na help. It's an obligation na. So, it creates a massive long-term headache for the stability of the institution itself.
Problema din yun sa mga susunod. Kasi papasok na naman din yung argument na iba't sa ganito, ganyan. Sa akin wala. Okay, so, and so on and so forth.
And there's the slippery slope. Once you grant a favor to one well-connected person, the entire formal system loses its credibility. The next person in line looks at it and says, "Why did they get a pass but I didn't?" Diba?
Oh, personally, ako inaaway ko talaga pag nakaka-experience ako ng ganyan eh. Kasi, alam mo yung feeling na ang tagal mong pumila, tapos sila kakarating lang, tapos sila agad yung mauuna. But, kidding aside, it definitely destroys public trust. Nga, sabi ko, diba? Kaya, yung mga Filipino, bilis uminit yung ulo dahil dyan. Kasi instead of building strong, predictable institutions where everyone is treated equally, we get the highly unstable system that run entirely on moving targets, hidden deals, and personal IOUs. Parang ano nga, it's more on personal benefit lang din talaga, no?
Oo, totoo. It turns our institutions into empty shells, while personal connections call all the shots. Up next, we look at why the whole state doesn't just collapse under the weight of its favoritism.
If institutions are weak and often vulnerable to elite influence, why does the Philippine state continue functioning instead of collapsing? Okay, so in terms of personal favors naman and connections, it is constantly bypassing formal rules. It begs a massive question. If our institution are this vulnerable to elite influence and rule bending, then why hasn't the Philippine state completely collapsed? Bakit patuloy pa rin siyang tumatakbo? Para bang walang nababago sa sistema natin. Di ba, Kisha?
Oo, diba? You'd think a system this deeply transactional would just fall apart. But when we pose this exact dilemma to political scientist Justin Manalo, he actually flipped the script on us. He argues that we are looking at the problem all wrong. Let's play his take on institutional stability.
Hindi naman kasi hindi dahil, kumbaga yung institutions natin na yan, no? I would say it's quite stable. Kasi ang bawat institutions, no, or establishments natin, or even offices are created by law, no? So, hindi siya meron niyang sariling mandate kung paano siya pinapatakbo.
So, ibig sabihin, ang gustong sabihin sa atin ni Sir Jazz is our institutions aren't actually weak in terms sa paniniwala natin since they are structurally stable because they are legally codified.
Exactly. On paper, the blueprint is solid. These offices don't just appear out of nowhere. They are literally created by law, and each one has a built-in independent mandate that outlines exactly how it is supposed to function. That legal framework is the backbone that keeps the entire state from collapsing into complete chaos.
Kaya, isa rin dyan yung isa rin yung dahilan kung bakit maraming tao yung may ayaw na matuloy yung cha-cha na tinatawag natin or charter change, diba? So, the structure itself is resilient, sabi nga nila. But if the design isn't the flaw, then ano yung nagkukos ng breakdown na lagi nating nakikita sa headlines ng news, di ba? Yung iniisip ng mga tao na masisira na ba yung gobyerno ng Pilipinas dahil sa araw-araw na issue nito?
Oh, tama. Kagaya nga nung sinabi kanina, it comes down to the human element. Sir Justin explains that the true vulnerability isn't the institution itself, but the specific people who hold the keys to the office. Kagaya nung mga natin ngayon, kanto sira-sira na.
The problem or the concern is how the involved individuals within that certain institution would run the office.
So it's all about the navigation process. So an office like For example, the Department of Justice or even a local municipal hall has a strong legal foundation, but its actual performance completely changes depending who is sitting in the driver's seat. Kung sino syempre nagpapatakbo. Kasi, ah, yung may authority palagi yung ano 'di ba, may control sa lahat. So nakadepende sa kanya yung performance ng certain office kumbaga.
Oh, the institution is just an empty vehicle. The legal mandate gives it wheels, but the leader determines the direction. If a leader chooses to navigate the office by letting elite influence, personal favors, or political loyalty take priority, the institution looks weak from the outside, but it's actually just being mismanaged from the inside.
That's a really perfect distinction, Kisha, no? Kasi the state survives because the laws and structures are durable naman to withstand bad actors ng mga let's say yung mga politicians nating who doesn't perform their job well, okay? The system doesn't collapse. It just gets hijacked kumbaga by whenever or whoever is running it at the time.
Exactly. It shifts the blame from a failed system to failed leadership executions. And speaking of how leaders navigate these spaces, it leads us directly to the ultimate balancing act in local governance, the presence of political dynasties. Do they provide stability to this navigation or do they completely ruin it?
Okay, so since napag-usapan na yung mga weak sides ng institution, siguro start naman tayo dito sa strength ng society. Ganon. So, let me start off. So, yung parang favoritism ng for the elite, yung influence nila, it gives a uneven leadership effect or affects the way the government works. So, kumbaga, for me, honestly kasi, parang it leaves us with the huge question mark na parang if institutions are still struggling this much, bakit hindi pa rin bumabagsak yung sistema ng Pilipinas? Or sistema. Basically, sistema lang, ganun. Ano tingin mo,
Well,
Jaja?
Well, yes, of course. Because if we look at it logically, if formal systems keep running into problems like this, you would expect society to fall into chaos. Pero hindi yan nangyayari sa atin eh. Somehow, the Philippines keeps functioning.
And feeling ko, dun papasok yung idea of a strong society. Kasi parang when institutions have gaps or they leave gaps, parang yung society, it often, fills that gap in. Alam mo yun?
Oh yes, and yung pinag-uusapan natin dito, hindi lang siya about random acts of kindness. Rather, we're talking about yung mga powerful social forces like the NGOs, elite families, religious groups, tapos yung mga family networks.
Tama ka dyan, Jaja. And, alam mo, bumabalik pa rin tayo dun sa main question ng ating podcast ngayon, ano? Parang, are dynasties a symptom of weak institution? Or is it the reason why the society still functions up until now? Diba?
Yeah. So when we asked Sir Justin, he did not give us a simple yes or no answer. Instead, he offered a much more deeper perspective. Now, let us hear from him.
Political dynasties or yung existence kasi ng political dynasties are very much can be traced back as early as the pre-Spanish period. Meron tayong mga tinatawag na balangay or barangay headed by a certain individual, belong to a family. Okay? And supposedly, yung successor nila ay dapat kamag-anak nila lang, or anak nila, ganyan. So, nag-evolve na siya over time. Okay? But the way that it is done is still the same. Kailangan may evolve na pamilya, either yung anak mo, or yung kapatid mo, or yung asawa mo, ganyan. Part of a democratic process. The problem, however, that we have is hindi na nagkakaroon ng opportunity for the other individuals or for non-political dynasty individuals to prove their worth.
So, what stood out for me is that he does not treat dynasties as something completely foreign sa politics natin. Of course, he traces them back to our historical patterns of leadership.
You know, for me naman, it is really interesting because usually when people hear political dynasty, ang reaction nila is automatically negative agad, di ba? Di ba? So, but now he's pointing out that a family-based leadership has existed for centuries and nag-evolve na lang talaga siya alongside our political system, di ba?
Yes, and like at the same time, he also recognizes the downside.
As of now, I would say it weakens, no? Kasi nawawalan ng competition. No? So, dahil nga madami na tayong mga political dynasties, nawawalan ng opportunity yung iba, no, to participate, okay, or to serve their community. Okay? Kasi una, kapag meron ng almost yung isang kandidato ay galing sa political dynasty, yung isa naman ay wala. Siyempre, itong isa, may resources na to. Compared dito sa isa na wala. It actually narrows down the competition.
But you know, here's where the conversation really becomes more, you know, complex or complicated. Kasi parang even parang yung political dynasties, weaken competition, no? Communities often continue relying on strong social networks to function. Diba, Jaja?
Yes, and that goes beyond politics. Take religious organizations for example, during mga bagyo or like disasters, crisis, churches and faith-based groups rather, they usually mobilize quickly. They provide relief, shelter, and emotional support.
You know, same goes with NGOs, no? Whether it's education or healthcare man yan or community development, you know, these organizations frequently step in where government services are limited or, you know, kind of delayed sa pag-action. Ganun.
Yes, and there's also then there's probably the strongest support system that many Filipinos know. Ito na yung family and kinship networks.
You know, if nagpapakatotoo lang talaga tayo, when institution moves slowly, you know, people often turn first to relatives, you know, neighbors, and trusted connection. Kumbaga, kapag may kakilala tayo, parang, syempre, magpapatulong na tayo sa kanila in such way. Alam mo yun?
Yes, which is exactly why society appears strong in this framework. These networks compensate for institutional weakness and help keep people or yung communities functioning.
Pero, you know, it also leaves us with that another very, di naman sa very difficult, pero medyo complicated na question. You know, if society keeps feeling these gaps, does that lessen the pressure for the government to reform?
Depende sa mga apektuhan na institution. Kasi meron tayong mga performing din na institution and meron din na talagang mga mahihina. Okay? But reforms are always present naman. Hindi naman yan mawawala. Hindi siya band-aid solution. So, when we reform something, it has to be for the long run. No? It should last for 20 years.
Well, I like that distinction. Sir Justin isn't saying na yung reform nawawala na siya. Rather, he's saying na ang real challenge dito is making these reforms sustainable.
You know, so maybe a strong society doesn't necessarily stop the reform, but it can make institutional weaknesses, you know, easier to live with these communities. Parang they learn to adapt. Ganon.
Yes, and that brings us back to our angle question.
Are dynasties and social networks signs of weak institution, or are they part of the system that still holds us together?
Maybe the uncomfortable truth is that they are both.
Jaja, they really revealed that the limits of formal governance rather, sorry, but they also help us keep the society really stable. Parang makita natin that the interaction even more clearly when we move into our case study right now.
So, napag-usapan na natin yung how institutions in the Philippines often get bypassed by favors, connections, and elite influence. Nakita rin natin kung paano yung society natin steps into how to fill those gaps. But the real story is how these two realities collide in everyday life. Dito napapasama natin yung framework na weak state, strong society.
Exactly, because when we say state weakness, we're talking about institutions that look stable on paper but are vulnerable in practice. So balikan natin yung sinabi kanina ni Sir Justin Manalo na these offices are legally created. They have mandates. But their credibility depends on how leaders navigate them. And that's where palakasan and utang na loob come in. Their cultural values that should be about solidarity, but inside governance, they become transactional shortcuts. And yet, society doesn't collapse when that happens. Families, communities, and networks step in. That's why the weak state and strong society aren't separate. They're constantly shaping each other.
Oh, tama yan actually. So, kung bibigyan natin siya ng examples, let's take Cebu politics for an example. So, for decades, the Osmeña and Garcia families have dominated, di ba? That's classic bossism. Personal rules standing in for institutional governance. Elections happen, pero they just recycle the same plans over and over.
Yes, tama ka, Andrea. And people navigate that system through patron-client bonds. That the state is weak because elections don't really bring in new voices. But society is strong because voters rely on clans for scholarship, jobs, and even infrastructure projects. It is survival politics. And it's not just about resources, it's about identity and belonging. People feel tied to these clans because they deliver in ways the state often doesn't.
So, ito na nga yung paradox. Weak institutions allow dynasties to thrive, pero strong social ties keep the system resilient. So, reform stalls, but society keeps things running, ganon?
Now let's look at disaster. Isipin niyo yung mga typhoons. Municipal emergency mechanisms often stall. Relief is slow and coordination is messy.
Oo. Pero communities don't wait. Volunteers, church group, NGOs, and even neighbors mobilize almost immediately. They share food, organize rescue boats, and set up makeshift shelters.
Yes, and that's the same dynamic again. Weak state capacity leaves gap. Pero yung strong society, yung talagang nag-feel eh. Volunteerism and kinship networks become the real safety net. Pinapatunayan nito na yung resilient doesn't always come from the state, pero it often comes from the people themselves.
Oh, exactly actually. Disasters expose the state's limits, but they also highlight society's strength. So, whether it's dynasties in politics or grassroots disaster response, the pattern is the same. Pare-parehas lang. The Philippine state survives not because it's strong, but because society is strong enough to keep things going.
That's right, Andrea. And ito yung ine-emphasize na paradox ni na Abinales and Amoroso. Weak institutions persist, but resilient social forces ensure continuity. Ito yung push and pull, the tension between state weakness and social strength. That explains why Philippines endures despite fragility.
It's not a story of collapse, pero it's a story of adaptation. Society compensates, substitutes, and sustains, even when the state falters. And that's why the framework of weak state, strong society continues to resonate today.
Well, that set us up perfectly for our conclusion, where we'll think about what this means for the future of Philippine governance.
So, ayun, after everything we've talked about today, it feels like we come back to the same paradox over and over again. Sabi ko nga kanina, paulit-ulit lang yung nangyayari sa system natin. Whether iba na yung nakaupong presidente or may bago na naman tayong issue politikan sa politics natin na kinakaharap as of today. And the Philippine state isn't collapsing, kagaya ng inaasahan natin. Even though we constantly see favoritism, patronage, political dynasties, and elite influence shaping how institutions operate. Di ba, Yuna?
Oh, exactly, Keith. And I think what's what makes our thesis really interesting is that the same networks that weaken formal institutions are often the same networks keeping the system running. Like, hello, parang, alam mo, yun, parang it interconnects ba? Even
Oo.
though magkasalungat sila, nag interconnect siya. So, whether it's political clans, local leaders, religious groups, community organization, or even family connections, no? They
Oo.
step in and provide order when formal institutions, fall short.
Kaya ang hirap niya i-cut off sa system natin,
Mhm.
no? Ang hirap niya ayusin. Kasi, kagaya nga sabi ni Yuna, kung ano yung nagpapahirap sa sistema natin, may ginagawa rin siyang
Oo.
nagbe-benefit sa system natin, 'di ba? So it only means that the issue isn't as simple as saying that the state is weak and the society is strong. They're actually deeply connected, kagaya nga sabi
Mhm.
ni Yuda, where the state survives because it works with these networks and accommodates them. And more specifically, in many cases, depends on them.
And that's where the paradox really comes in, no? Doon siya pumapasok. These networks can solve problems, mobilize, the resources, and provide stability. But at the same time, siya din yung nagpapahirap na parang to build a stronger and more independent institutions. In a way na they're both a solution and part of the problem of the Philippines. Parang, alam mo yun, like,
Oo. So going back to our question na our dynasties a symptom of weak institutions or the reason the system still works. Based on everything we've discussed and uh, we consulted with Sir Jas, actually they're arguably both. Since they thrive because institutions leave space for them but also help maintain political order in places where state struggles to reach on its own.
looking ahead, siguro, maybe the challenge for the Philippine government isn't simply getting rid of these social networks. Maybe it's about finding a way to strengthen institutions so that public services, accountability, and opportunities, don't depend on who you know or which families and member. Parang siguro in a sense, ang kailangan talaga ng Philippines is, great balance, hindi naman sa balance, pero siguro mas great security in this kind of things. Siguro kaya some families na lang din or some of us ginagawa na lang din or kumukuha na lang stepping stone to get into things kasi may mga bagay tayo na hindi basta-basta makuha kasi the Philippines or the Philippine government doesn't give us that much authority, di ba, Kian?
Totoo. Kasi, guys, at the end of the day, a government shouldn't have to rely on personal favors or political plans of function. Kasi, come on guys, we're in a democratic country. Strong communities will always matter. But ideally, strong institutions should be able to stand alongside with them. Not actually replaced by them nga eh.
And maybe that's the future we're aiming for. A
Yeah.
Philippines wherein institutions are strong enough to serve everybody fairly,
Mm-mm.
while communities remain, active partners in governance rather than substitute for it.
Oo, totoo. So, ayan guys, before we end this podcast, we'd like to acknowledge uh the political scientists that we've interviewed to ano ito, to make our discussion smooth sailing ba kumbaga. Thank you very much, Sir Justin Manalo, for sharing your insights and helping us connect these theories to the realities we experience today. And also the book of Abenales and Amoroso for being our foundation within this discussion. So, yun lang guys.
So this has been Chicas with Monikas. Thank you for listening. Bye bye.